Okay, I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakat Kwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who teach the Bible in 100% truth. And Shalom to the hopeful elect of the 12 tribes of Israel, starting with the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in the land of North Central and South America, the 12 tribes of Israel, as well as the speckled bird, the other Israelite foreigners who live across the earth, amongst other nations, looking at the other nations who receive this truth. Shalom to you. So today we're looking at the topic of World War III, and we're very close to that time. We're waiting for the implementation of the MOTB, which is around the corner. It could be, back end of this year, next year. And, very soon after that, we're going to be into Jacob's trouble and eventually World War III and the return of the Lord. Gone into it many times. These are the few major prophecies left to take place. There are other prophecies that coincide with these prophecies taking place. For example, famine and great tribulation, so on and so forth. But these are the main points, the main factors we're looking out for. These are the major signs when the MOTB, the next major sign, takes place. We know the other signs or the other events, shall we say, the other prophecies will come in very short, close proximity to that, fulfillment of the MOTB. So, as well as keeping our eye on the MOTB situation, the CBDC digital system, we're also keeping an eye on, the propaganda that's taking place surrounding this development of World War III, as well as many other things that are going on in the world. And so we're looking at that today, and this is Psalms 21:9. It says, "Thou shalt make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger." This is talking about Babylon the Great, the headquarters of this Edomite empire. It says, "The Lord," all capitals, Yahweh, "shall swallow them up in his wrath, and the fire shall devour them. Their fruit shall thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children of men." So, ultimately, when we're in the kingdom and thousands years or so into that, and eventually the seed of the Edomites will be no more. And that great takedown, that destruction starts, when the Lord returns, takes them out of power, and then it's a gradual decline from there. And that takedown from Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai is going to involve many things. It's going to involve a visitation of so-called UFOs, chariots of the Most High, and then also include World War III, as I just explained, with these ICBMs, nuclear ICBMs, flying across the earth. And that's what it says here, "Thou shalt make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger. The Lord shall swallow them up in his wrath, and the fire shall devour them." So ultimately, scriptures tell you that America, Babylon the Great, will be turned into the lake of fire, or as described here, a fiery oven in the time of thine anger. And this will be done by nuclear ICBMs. We've gone into it many times, explained the Battle of Armageddon and how that will develop. And I've explained many times how, once the Battle of Armageddon takes place in the valley of Yehoshaphat, in the Fertile Crescent, once that takes place, very soon after that, the development of World War III will be to go to the nuclear ICBM level. And at that point, World War III will be fought on nuclear ICBMs, and America will be turned into fiery oven in the time of thine anger. So at the minute, we're looking across the geopolitical scene, and we're looking at mainly powers, nations across the earth who have nuclear weapons. Because we know, for the fulfillment of the destruction of America spoken of in Revelation 18, for example, we know that any nation with a nuclear ICBM will ultimately shoot it upon America, and America will be destroyed within 1 hour of these ICBMs being fired at that particular land. So in the build up to that, we're keeping our eye on the MOTB, and we also have to keep our eye on the war front and see how things are playing out. Now, I've brought out many times, looking at the situation with Iran, the Persians, the Carmanians, the Medes, whatever you want to call them. We've looked at those Middle East nations many times, and we've looked at Russia over the last year specifically quite a lot. Scriptures speak of Russia being a major part of World War III and that destruction of America. And so these are things that you're hearing about all the time. But one power that seems to be forgotten quite a lot, not entirely. I'm not going to say it entirely gets forgotten, but it probably gets mentioned the least, is North Korea with their ICBMs and their nuclear power. And today I've got a couple of articles looking at where they're at today, because it seems like, going into it, this leader, Kim Jong-un, has started off 2023 on the warpath. Now, at the top here says photos of the meeting released in state media revealed new flags for all Korean People's Army, the KPA, branches, including one for the Missile General Bureau. Now, this Kim Jong-un, he's known for going missing every now and again and taking himself out of the limelight. And he probably goes away for a little rest and relaxation, R&R, and then he comes back and, he gets things done. And, just at the start of the new year, he was actually, again, not seen in public for, I think, up to 40 days, which equals his longest ever period of not being seen by the media. But he's known for doing this. Every now and again, he'll disappear for 20 days, 21 days, 30 days. And his longest period of coming out of the limelight is 40 days. And he did that recently. And in January, he reappeared on the scene again. And, these Western media, they were, speculating whether he's ill or such and such. And they said, no, look, he's back. And here he is holding a meeting. And so at the start of 2023, he's reappeared and he seems rejuvenated. And he's held this meeting with the Korean People's Armies and all their branches. And he's given them all new flags because they're about to set a new agenda according to their own particular plans. And it says here, including one for the Missile General Bureau. So he's putting his love, shall we say, into his Missile General Bureau. This is little baby. So he's come back out, resurfaced in January 2023, and he looks like he's about to make changes. Now, ultimately looking at him, what we're really concerned about is his development of nuclear ICBM weapons. And that's we're not too worried about the flags, but the fact that he's going in that direction shows, how he's thinking. But ultimately, we want to know, what type of weapons he has and how close is he to actually using them against America. And this is Matthew 24:29. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened. So this is talking about the time of Jacob's trouble and the time of tribulation. It says, immediately after those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And now this is talking about that, the time when nuclear ICBMs are let off. And it says here, immediately after tribulation, those days the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. And this is because of all the destruction that's going to take place using these ICBMs. There's going to be a lot of smoke, and whatever the word is, whatever's released from these ICBMs is all going to be in the atmosphere. So ultimately, it's going to fill up the skies and make it a very dark and gloomy time across the earth. And you can also, when you want to talk about it says here, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So this is talking about the governments, the powers that be around the earth, who hold this military power. Once they start to see these ICBMs fly, there's going to be great fear amongst them, because they're going to know ultimately destruction could come to them at any moment. But when you look at the sun being darkened and the moon shall not give her light, you could also look into the understanding of the people of this world. At the minute, people have ICBMs, and they use it as a defense weapon. So they say, look, don't attack us, because if you do, we have an ICBM to use. And it's, in a way, it's they're used as deterrents to other nations to not cause you trouble. But ultimately, when this common understanding, can't we just all get along? That's all going to go out the window come the day of the Lord. The Lord is going to put the spirit on them, and these leaders of these nations, to think about themselves and only themselves. And so at that point, that's where they're going to let off these ICBMs. That understanding the way of the world, can't we just all get along? We have ICBMs, but nobody really wants to push the button. That's all going to go out the window come the day of the Lord. Those ICBMs, that red button is going to be hit. And then it goes on to say, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Yahushua will return in a chariot, so-called UFO, in the sky, which will also help to darken the sky, the sun and the moon, the light that they give. It says, and then shall the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Before we get into the article, some more scriptures regarding the ICBMs is Jeremiah 50:14. It says, put yourselves in array against Babylon round about, Babylon being America. It says, all ye that bend the bow, all those that have ICBMs. It says, shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against the Lord, all capitals Yahweh. So, bending that bow is ultimately preparing that silo. And then it says, shoot at her, spare no arrows. These arrows represent ICBMs. To shout against her round about. She hath given her hand, her foundations are fallen, her walls are thrown down, for it is the vengeance of the Lord. Take vengeance upon her, as she hath done, and do unto her. So this is the purpose of these ICBMs. This is Zephaniah 3:8. It says, therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, all capitals again, Yahweh, who's coming in the name also of Yahushua. It says, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. And ultimately Yahweh, Hashem Yahushua, is going to raise up the nations and bring them down into the valley of decision, the valley of Yahushua, which is Armageddon. And this is when World War III will fully take place, official, and it'll be on the news. And eventually, through that process, you will start to see these ICBMs fired, and then and that's when you're going to see the Yahweh's indignation poured against these nations, especially Edom, Babylon the Great, America. So yeah, we understand that. I mean, there's plenty of scriptures I could go into regarding the arrows of the Lord, the ICBMs, and the flesh-eating fire that will encompass the land of America. We could go into the scripture of lake of fire, for example. But just to keep it short, I just brought up a few, and we're going to go into the articles now to see what's going down. Okay, so this is dated the 19th of February, 23, which is today, 22. So yeah, we're talking Sunday, and today's Wednesday. And this is North Korea fires intercontinental ballistic missile into Japan's territory. The intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, landed in waters within Japan's exclusive economic zone. Okay, I believe this is the independent newspaper. It says North Korea on Sunday said it had conducted its latest long-range missile test as a surprise drill, saying it demonstrated its capacity for fatal nuclear counterattack. Because this is something that's gone on over the weekend, and we used to see North Korea carry out these tests and these drills, and they are intensifying and they are increasing, and that's what we're looking at today. But the first thing you've got to understand, a lot of people over the weekend just been going about their business. The wife's dragging them around here, there, everywhere, or maybe they've got to go to work. But on the geopolitical, nuclear scene, this is what's happening. This is what's going down. North Korea have been having more tests over the weekend, firing ICBMs into Japanese territory, into their waters. North Korea says it fired ICBM as a warning to the US and South Korea. This is from the article France 24, also dated the 19th of Feb. And this is another headline: North Korea's latest ICBM launch ignites US and South Korea weekend military drills. So ultimately what's happened is North Korea have, let off this ICBM as a test. And now that's got the US and South Korea on red alert, because the US have dealings with South Korea. And, ultimately the US have an interest in South Korea, but so do North Korea. They, ultimately they want to take back South Korea as their own province, if you like. But at the minute, South Korea are their own nation, but they have dealings with America. America, manipulate them and get them to do business in their particular way. And, smaller nations like South Korea, ultimately what they'll say to America is, if we do things your way, you then have to protect us against enemies who want us to do things their way. And that's the situation that's going on down with North and South Korea. South Korea are fully involved with America, and North Korea would like to regain control of South Korea. If they do that, they have to come across the US. So like I say, there's a few headlines there, but I'm going to go into the France 24 article specifically. It says North Korea said Sunday it had test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile as a warning to Washington and Seoul, saying the successful surprise drill demonstrated Pyongyang's capacity to launch a fatal nuclear counterattack. In response, the United States and South Korea staged joint air drills featuring a strategic bomber and stealth fighter jets, Seoul said. The United States and Japan also held a joint military drill on Sunday, Tokyo Defense Ministry said. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered the sudden launching drill at 8 a.m. Saturday, 11 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. And a Hwasong-15 missile, a weapon first tested by the North in 2017, was fired from Pyongyang's airport that afternoon, the official KCNA reported. South Korea's military said it detected a ICBM launch at 8:22, so it took them 22 minutes to detect that an ICBM had been launched. On Saturday, Japan said the missile flew for 66 minutes before splashing down in its exclusive economic zone, with their analysts indicating it was capable of hitting the mainland United States. So North Korea let off this ICBM. To me, that was Saturday night. To them, I believe that would have been Sunday morning. And, this ICBM landed in Japanese waters. But, the Japan defense system have come out and said, we believe that had enough power to reach America. It says North Korea's leadership hailed the test, its first in 7 weeks. So there's going to be more going on for 7 weeks, saying it showed the actual war capacity of the ICBM units, which are ready for mobile and mighty counterattack. And that reminds us of these scriptures that tell us, these let the weak say I'm strong. These weak nations, with their ICBMs, they're standing up to America and letting them know that, we are strong, we are mighty. Because the launch was actual proof of the country's capacity of fatal nuclear counterattack on the hostile forces, it said. The South Korea military said Sunday it had staged joint air drills with the United States featuring at least one US B-1B long-range bomber. The exercise displayed the timely and immediate deployment of the US extended deterrence assets to the Korean peninsula, demonstrating the overwhelming force of the Allies, the Defense Ministry said in a statement. US and Japanese forces also held a joint exercise on Sunday amid an increasingly severe security environment. Japan's Defense Ministry said, although it offered no details about the type of drill conducted, the sanctions-busting North Korea launch came just days before Seoul and Washington are due to start joint tabletop exercises aimed at improving their response in the event of a North Korean nuclear attack. So, America are about to start some drills and they tried to exercise the response time to a North Korea nuclear attack. That's something they're about to get involved in at the minute. But it called North Korea here sanction busting. The sanction busting North Korea launch came just days before Seoul and Washington are due to start. So, like I just explained, America go around the world and they try to infiltrate every government and have their say within that government. They then try to get these governments to do business in, to keep it to make a brief statement, they're doing it in the American way, in the way that America want to do it. These smaller nations then say to America, well, if we do things your way, what are we going to, how are you going to protect us against people who don't want to do things your way? And America will say, we're a big power, we can protect you against these smaller nations. These smaller nations are getting stronger. And ultimately, what's been happening up until now is a lot of these smaller nations have had sanctions put on them by America to make them suffer economically. North Korea have suffered sanctions from America, so have Iran. And now we're in the time where Yahweh Shai has appointed us for, it was pointed a time specifically for World War III. We're coming close to that time. So these nations that have got sanctions on them, placed by America, are starting to get angry. And they're building their ICBM weapons behind the scenes, and they're starting to antagonize America and tell America, we're ready for war. So this is something that I've gone into before. And at the minute, the issue for America is that they have this problem all over the world. They've got Russia fronting them out, saying, throw it at us and we'll start World War III. You've got Iran saying, throw it at us and we'll start World War III. And North Korea are now joining that mentality. China are also looking to invade Taiwan and take that back, which is US orientated, if you like, up until now. So that's also a problem for America. Babylon the Great has its enemies all over the world that have strong nuclear capabilities, and they're all standing up one by one, and they're sticking their chest out at America. And the one common thing you're going to find with a lot of these enemies that ultimately shoot ICBMs on America is, they're all going to be under sanctions. That's what's making them angry to shoot the ICBMs in the first place. We know that the EU will shoot ICBMs on America. America don't particularly have many sanctions on the EU, but the sanctions they placed on Russia, buying and selling their gas and oil, that is affecting Europe. And that is causing economic hardship for Europe. And this will cause the sour taste for the Europeans. And this will lead to Europe ultimately shooting ICBMs on America. So it all leads back to sanctions. Carrying on here, it says Pyongyang warned last week. Pyongyang, I believe that's the capital of North Korea. It says warned last week of an unprecedentedly strong response to upcoming drills, which it describes as preparations for war, and blames for the deteriorating security situation in the Korean Peninsula. This is what North Korea is saying. It says the Saturday test is significant as the event was ordered the day of, and so this is not so much a traditional test but an exercise. US-based analyst and Ankit Panda told AFP. So this test that happened on the weekend wasn't a traditional test. It was actually an exercise. And the fact that there was no warning or planning of it the day before, Kim Jong-un has woken up on that Sunday morning. They keep saying Saturday to us, it was Sunday to him. So he woke up on that Sunday morning, 8 o'clock, and he picked up the phone and he said, there's a drill. We're going to war. I want you to act it out now. And so that put everybody into battle stations. That's the same thing that would happen if war were to break out today. The nation that you're living in, that's what would happen. The message would go out, we're attack is coming in, and we need to get our army up and running and out there within minutes. And this is what it was. He said, we should expect to see additional exercises of this sort, he said. So Sue Kim, a former CIA career analyst who now works at management consulting firm LMI, said the exercise appeared to be Kim's way of telling the US and ROK that his country is continuing to hone its ballistic missile capabilities for eventual use in a real-time scenario. These countries are preparing themselves for war, ICBM war at that. It says the weapons aren't for display only, she told AFP. This layer of imminence is probably intended to intimidate the Allies, notably as they're making efforts to strengthen deterrence in Korean Peninsula. So, what North Korea are trying to show you is that, we can get the show on the road within minutes. We can just wake up on that day, put the message out, and we're ICBM prepared within minutes. That's the message they're sending out, trying to create fear amongst America and its allies. It says Park Won-gon, a professor of Ewha University, said it marked the first time that North Korea had given a detailed account of the order to launch process. Because this is the first time they let you know of the whole process, because they wanted to show you how quick it could be. And I've mentioned this before, obviously scriptures talk about America being destroyed within 1 hour by ICBMs. So when World War III gets to that stage, that these nations start to shoot ICBMs on America, it will all take place within an hour. And that leaves very little response time for America to fire back ICBMs. And the fact that North Korea is showing you how quick they can get the show on the road, shows us that, it's obviously pushing us towards the fulfillment of America being destroyed within an hour. It says the clear indication of Kim Jong-un's order is significant, Park said. It showed these weapons are all deployed for actual combat and ready to launch at any time, he said. But the 9-hour process for Kim Jong-un's order to the actual launch was a long time, so Kim said, suggesting Pyongyang's may face greater challenges in launching a realistic scenario. So it still took him 9 hours to respond, which is still a hell of a long time. And, that's why this is the first test within the next 7 weeks. These exercises are going to continue. And, what does practice make? It makes perfect. And that's what he's going to get them to do. He's going to get them to practice until they're perfect. And this is relations between the two Koreas are already at one of their lowest points in years after North Korea declared itself an irreversible nuclear state. Okay, that's what North Korea has declared themselves as, an irreversible nuclear state. We now have nuclear weapons, and there's no hope in hell of us, dismantling them and going backwards. This is what we are. We're irreversible nuclear state. And Leader Kim called for an exponential increase in weapons production, including tactical nuclear weapons. He wants a rapid increase. He wants to just build this up. He's obviously inspired by his boy Vladimir Putin. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol has sought to boost cooperation with the United States in response, pledging to expand joint military exercises and improve Washington's so-called extended deterrence offering, including with nuclear assets. So as a response, America has step up the defense. North Korea spokeswoman Kim's sister, Kim Yo-jong, said on Sunday it was these moves by Seoul and Washington that further endangers the situation every moment, destroying the stability of the region, according to KCNA report. So all they're going to do is just keep blaming each other. I warn that we will watch every movement of the enemy and take corresponding and very powerful and overwhelming counteraction against his every move hostile to us, she added. And when you hear of in the scriptures of America being destroyed within an hour by ICBMs, by all these nations over the world, I've explained before, that is fear of what America can do to them. And that fear is ultimately going to trigger an overreaction by these nations. And that's what she's gone on to say here. I warn that we will watch every movement of the enemy and take corresponding and very powerful and overwhelming counteraction against its every move hostile to us. So, they're not going to just fight fire with fire. They're going to try and fight fire with double fire. They want to overwhelm any enemy that comes across them. And that's when America gets destroyed within that hour, that will be the ultimate overwhelming. if you like. It says all of this point to the start of high intensity provocations from North Korea, Professor Park of Ua University told AFP. What difference from 2022 is the last year, their justification was that the launches were part of their 5-year military plan, he said. Now they are making clear that they will counter the United States and South Korea. So as I told you at the top, 2023, Kim Jong-un took a little break, little R&R, rest and relaxation, and he's come back with a vengeance. He's got his plan. He's given out flags to everybody, even his Missile Defense Bureau. And now he's stepping up his game. He started to talk about counteracting America and South Korea. Park said the redoubled aggression from Pyongyang could also indicate the domestic situation had worsened. South Korean officials recently warned the North could be facing severe food shortages after years of C-19-linked isolation. North Korea always takes a hardline approach and creates external crisis as part of its siege mentality tactic to overcome internal struggles. So in North Korea, the government have a us against them attitude, and they like to blame their problems internally on the way the world is run, on other people, and it's kind of like us against them. It is a typical North Korean behavior to unite the people by highlighting the South Korea-US threat, he said. So, that's talking about the situation that's gone down over the weekend, and it's quite clearly showing you that Kim Jong-un is stepping up his game. I have another article here. This is from the Financial Times, and I'm going to try and get through this one quickly. This is also very interesting. The Financial Times. This is dated the 8th of January 2023, and I'll put these articles, the link for them, in the description box. Now, this one goes into a little bit more detail as to, how the understanding is between North Korea and the US. It says North Korea's evolving nuclear threat, too great to deter. Kim Jong-un's growing arsenal is setting the scene for a risky game of military one-upmanship with the US and its East Asian allies. And that's what we're seeing developing now, with these tests that are carried on over the weekend, these exercises. In his last known letter to a US president, an emotional Kim Jong-un rebuked Donald Trump for carrying out scheduled joint military exercises with South Korea. In that letter, it read this. It said, "I am clearly offended, and I do not want to hide this feeling from you," Kim wrote in August 2019. "If you do not think of our relationship as a stepping stone that only benefits you, then you would not make me look like an idiot that will only give without getting anything in return." The letter marked the end of a turbulent period in US-North Korean relations that included Trump's threat to inflict fire and fury like the world has never seen upon the East Asian dictatorship, and culminated in a series of historic meetings between the two men. Having failed to secure the sanctions, relief, and security guarantees he was seeking, however, Kim has eschewed diplomacy ever since. He's eschewed means he's avoided it at all costs. Since Kim, having failed to secure the type of sanctions relief that he wanted for his nation, he's now shunning diplomacy and doesn't really want to talk to them. And ultimately, this all goes back to these sanctions that America tried to place on you. They tell you to do things their way, and if not, they'll sanction you. So what choice does that leave you? You either have to do things their way, but maybe you want to do things your way. But you do things your way, they'll hit you in the pocket. They'll stop you trading with certain people. And this is how America is ultimately going to fall into this pit that it's digging itself. Focusing instead on upgrading his nuclear weapons program. Now, in spite of tough international sanctions and extreme self-imposed isolation during the C-19 time, experts warn that North Korea has made such rapid progress with its military goals that existing arrangements for the defense of South Korea, Japan, and US could soon be rendered obsolete. And that's what they're saying. He's developing this technology so fast that the current defense system they have in that area arranged between Japan, South Korea, and the US, it'll end up being obsolete because the power generated out of North Korea could easily outweigh that. So now it's saying that you have to come back with a new plan. North Korea is on its way to perfecting its nuclear program, says Sue Mi Terry, a former CIA analyst who heads the Asian program at the Wilson Center think tank in Washington. I think there is a serious risk that a North Korean crisis could erupt while we are all focused on China potentially invading Taiwan. And this is what I've mentioned before. America have to have their eyes on all of these places because they're behind a lot of the sanctions and they've got their fingers in many pies. But all over the world, their enemies are starting to stand up, and Americans having to keep their eye on them. And ultimately, when it comes down to World War III, they're going to be so stretched across the board, it's going to, help propel their demise. Edomites, Babylon the Great, America. Kim is showing no signs of slowing down. In his New Year's address, he declared he would exponentially increase nuclear weapons production in 2023 and stress his willingness to use his nuclear arsenal for offensive as well as defensive purposes. Pyongyang's advances in weapons development and its adoption of a more aggressive nuclear doctrine have prompted Seoul and Tokyo to seek greater reassurance from its allies, US, who responded with increased patrols of nuclear-capable military assets on and around the Korean Peninsula. The Biden administration has also vowed to end the Kim regime if it ever used nuclear weapons. But some analysts worry that a strategy to meet strength with strength risks making conflict even more likely. Every time the Americans do something to reassure the South Koreans that they are prepared to defend them, they weaken their assurances to the North Koreans that they are not preparing to attack them, says Shin Song-ho, a professor of international security at Seoul National University. The North Koreans are sending the message that they are not prepared to go down without a fight. So reading on here, it says, preparing for battle. Cigarette in hand, a beaming Kim last month oversaw North Korea's first known test of a large diameter solid rocket motor at the test site in the country's western North Pyongan province. The test brought his regime a step closer to acquiring a solid propellant intercontinental ballistic missile that, unlike liquid fuel missiles, can be fueled in secret before they are deployed, giving the adversaries far less time to conduct a preventative strike. This is one of many recent examples of Pyongyang's approaching or crossing key technical thresholds that are making its nuclear arsenal increasingly versatile and difficult to destroy or defend against. And this is what it is. The technology that these guys have is increasing rapidly at a fast rate. And, Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai is ultimately giving them the understanding of it. And that's, preparing us for the time of World War III, time of the ICBMs, Arrows of the Lord. North Korea has tested the Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile, which has an estimated range of 15,000 kilometers within striking distance of the US mainland. It has also tested a rocket fitted with a conical maneuvering re-entry vehicle, or MARV, which is potentially harder to intercept and destroy than a standard ballistic warhead. So this is a rocket fitted with a maneuvering re-entry vehicle. So, what I'm assuming is that this vehicle, Russia have similar technology where they can fire rockets into space, so-called the outer orbit, which is out of, the view of radar system, and it can be flying around there for days. And when it's ready, it will direct from space directly downwards into its target, and then it gives you a very short notice period of it coming. Something like that could already have been launched and circling in the orbit now, and whenever they're ready, they could hit the button, and that could take a detour and directly down onto its target. So these are very hard to intercept, and it looks like that North Korea have a same particular type of technology, a conical maneuvering re-entry vehicle. It says, but the development that most worries policymakers in Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington is North Korea's new generation of lower yield tactical and battlefield nuclear weapons. Now, before I move on, see it says here, the development as most worried policymakers in Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington. And these are the people who really have control, the people who make the policies. And this is what I explained before. America have the hand in these other nations. And when they're making their policies, they speak to them and manipulate them to make them coincide with what America want them to be, to help propel America as the greatest nation on earth, that king. And so this ultimately causes problems with neighboring nations who do not want to join this with America, and they ultimately become enemies of America. So America not only have to defend themselves, they have to defend their allies, i.e. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, for example. It says, on New Year's Day, North Korea test-fired its super large multiple launch rocket system, which Kim has claimed can strike anywhere in South Korea. These low-yield weapons can be used more precisely to target specific enemy assets, such as ports, airfields, ships, or concentration of troops, says Ankit Panda, a nuclear weapons expert at the Carnegie Endowment think tank in Washington. These are all these ideas and understandings are coming out of the various think tanks of these nations. And scriptures tell you that these enemies have a secret council of the wicked, and they just they lay snares privily, saying who shall see them. And this is their think tanks that come up with these ideas, and they try to put these policies in place, and they think that nobody can see them, manipulating the system. And every now and again you get an Iran, or you get a North Korea who can see it, and they stand up and they say, no, we're not playing ball. It says here, not only is their threshold for use much lower than ICBMs, he adds the decision to use them is more likely to be delegated to field commanders, increasing the risk of an accident, miscommunication, or miscalculation, resulting in nuclear use. What they're saying is that if these low-range nuclear weapons are given to field commanders, generals around about in the army, in the field, they could misuse them. And if you have a rocket that's set off and it lands on the wrong target, people may think that this is, that they could end up hitting a target that they didn't really want to hit, and then this might escalate things and ultimately bring about a full-on nuclear war. So this is another thing that they have that's worrying them. Kim Jong-un has got these low-range nuclear weapons, and he's handing them out to every commander he can in the field, and chances are one of them is going to get it wrong and have a miscalculation, and like I say, it could escalate from there. In a 20-day period from late September and early October, North Korea launched 15 newly developed missiles capable of delivering tactical nuclear warheads as part of a simulated nuclear attack on South Korea and US assets. The launches attended by Kim himself included short-range ballistic missiles, 5 from mobile road and rail platforms, and another 5 over Japan from a site near the border with China. North Korea fired more than twice as many missiles last year as were launched during the entirety of its reigns of former leaders Kim the First, Sun, and Kim Jong the First put together, says Jongmin Kim, an analyst with Seoul-based information service NK Pro. It is no longer strictly accurate to describe these launches simply as tests, she adds. Rather, North Korea is demonstrating to its adversaries that its nuclear forces are operational and ready for use. Now, this article has this diagram here, and this shows you North Korea's escalating testing program. If you look on the bottom left, you can see quite clearly 1984 and how many nuclear tests were taking place. And you can see the increase in the development of that over the years. And when you look over to the right, you see 2022 last year quite clearly outweighs all the previous years that have gone by, the amount of tests that are taking place. And looking at the key here, we can see a lot of the dots, the tests that took place are dark blue, which represents short-range ballistic missiles. Light blue represents cruise missile testing. Green represents submarine-launched ballistic missiles. And this aqua turquoise color, intermediate-range ballistic missiles, or is that the Taepong to Yuhan 3? We see the white dots at the very top, and these represent unknown missiles. So there are some unknown missiles with new technology on them that North Korea are testing, and these Western powers have no idea what they are. And so, like I said, I'm going to put the article, the link for it in the description box. So if you feel like having a look, you can have a look yourself. But you quite clearly see here where it says in the middle here, Kim Jong-un takes power, and we can see the increase in nuclear testing. And 2022 is a massive increase, as they're telling you, he's now ready. These drills, these testing, are now actually classed as exercises, and they're saying, they're showing that they're ready for war. This is the preparation of World War III. We know World War III should come about within the next 2 to 3 years. It should come about really by the end of 2025, because of the developments going over there in the land of Iran. And North Korea and their development is lining up very nicely along with that. And, just at the perfect time, all these nations are all of a sudden prepared for nuclear war. This is Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai, setting the scene for the day of the Lord. Carrying on here, it says in September, Kim adopted a more aggressive nuclear policy that outlines an unusually low threshold for use, such as preemptive strikes in a range of vaguely defined scenarios. The law stipulates that in the event of an attack on the state leadership and command organization, a North Korean nuclear strike would be launched automatically and immediately, suggesting Kim has already envisioned scenarios where command and control could be delegated over parts of his arsenal. The policy enshrines comments made by Kim in April and reiterated at this month's party congress that beyond the primary mission of preventing war, his nuclear weapons had a secondary mission if his country's fundamental interests were threatened. This has exacerbated fears that North Korea increasingly sees its nuclear arsenal as a means to engage in nuclear blackmail against the South, or even to start and win a conflict. Well, this is the same thing that the West do, America. But it's all right for them to do it, and they've done it for all these years. But when they have somebody else doing the exact same thing, they paint them as an enemy in the media. And those with the spirit, the understanding, can see right through it. This is not the first time North Korea established a nuclear policy law, but in the past they said it was for deterrence purposes, says Kim Gun, South Korea's special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs. But now they say it is not only for deterrence, but also for preemptive strike, and the conditions are very much arbitrary, which means they can use their tactical nuclear weapons at the time of their choosing. Okay, so this next bit is entitled Ironclad Commitment. Some critics believe that Biden administration has not paid enough attention to North Korea, particularly as it remains preoccupied with Ukraine and increases its focus on China. This is what we've been bringing out in these recent weeks and months. A senior US official said the administration has made multiple efforts to engage with North Korea, and it has been clear that Washington was willing to negotiate without preconditions. But he said the response from Pyongyang since the Biden administration came to office could be summed up as pretty much radio silence. So since Biden's taken power, when they try to talk to North Korea, all they're getting is radio silence. They're not, they're beyond the point of talking. They have enough arsenal and weapons to make themselves feel strong, and they feel strong. And now they're not going to come running to the whim of America at every given opportunity. says here that has left the US with few options other than to focus on reassuring their allies. In recent months, the US has deployed fighter jets and B-52 bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons to Korean Peninsula as part of a commitment made by US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in November last year to send nuclear-capable assets to the region on a constant and routine basis. These shows of force are designed to reassure policymakers in Seoul of Washington's ironclad commitment to South Korean security. But Sekun Paul Choi, a former strategist at the US-South Korea Joint Warfighting Headquarters, says the US is prioritizing symbolic gestures over substantive changes to the way the alliance operates. The US still seems to see the problem as primarily an issue of ally psychology rather than a transferred security challenge, says Choi, now a nuclear security fellow at the Rand Corporation think tank in Washington. So what he's saying is, this guy who's part of this think tank, he's basically saying that the US government and looking at it in the way that, if they just go out there and they just reassure their allies, that's all they need to do. But what he's trying to let them know is this situation has gone beyond that now. There is a very high risk of actual conflict. So you now need to readdress the way you're going to defend this situation, i.e. by sending in troops and having a huge military presence. And which, again, is going to do what? It's going to antagonize North Korea, Kim Jong-un. He notes that South Korean policymakers remain unsure of Washington's thinking around the circumstances in which the US might use nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, feeding anxiety in Seoul as to whether the US would really risk North Korean nuclear retaliation against one of its own cities by coming to South Korea's defense. So, South Korea are worried. They're saying, America, you say you're going to defend us against North Korea, but what if by doing that, North Korea then send the ICBM to you? Are you really going to keep defending us? And, this enemy is down the road from us. So we have to be careful when we make these policies with you. And this is the issue. The concern is shared by many in the Japanese national security establishment. Sujio Takahashi, head of Defense Policy Division at the National Institute of Defense Studies in Tokyo, says the US, South Korea, and Japan need to conduct exercises that stimulate a scenario in which nuclear weapons are used. The reality is very little such preparations are actually taking place, and there is awareness both in Japan and South Korea that they need to make a progress on this front, says Takashi Panda of the Carnegie Endowment. Says there will always be a limit to the reassurance that US policymakers can offer their East Asian counterparts regarding America's willingness to use nuclear weapons, as an ultimate decision resides solely with the president. So what they're saying is, pretty much comes down to the president to make that choice as to whether America are going to step up and actually have a nuclear defense in place to prepare for trouble with North Korea. Now, this diagram here is quite interesting. North Korea's nuclear test rise in power. This represents yield in kilotons per test. So in 2006, North Korea were testing their nuclear weapons and they were producing, 0.5 to 2 kilotons of damage, if you like, of power. Now, fast forward to today, they've now increased that to 140 plus yield in kilotons per test. So every test they're doing, they're increasing, and you can see a massive increase, from 2016 up to the present day. And they've gone from producing 10 kilotons per test to 140 plus. A senior US official disputes the notion that Washington is not communicating sufficiently with its allies on nuclear use, calling the level of coordination truly extraordinary. The US has also updated its national defense strategy to warn Pyongyang that any nuclear attack by North Korea against the United States or its allies and partners is unacceptable and will result in the end of that regime. But Panda dismisses the US commitment as braggadocio. recommending that Washington adopt greater ambiguity about the severe consequences that would follow nuclear use by Pyongyang. We don't make these types of threats against our nuclear adversaries, including Russia and China, he says. We are lying to ourselves if we think that this is credible. Choi agrees it is pure hubris for the US always to talk about deterring North Korea without acknowledging that North Korea has itself acquired the capabilities to deter the US. The US are in denial, so to speak. It says, when asked if the US would follow through with its commitment to end the regime in the event of North Korean nuclear use, South Korean nuclear envoy Kim Gun says, that's what they said, so when it is said, don't try to test it. As well as a kill chain policy for preemptive strikes in the event of imminent attack, South Korea is also publicly committed to an escalatory response as part of its massive punishment and retaliation. And this article goes on to discuss the policy more and the understanding of it all. I'm not going to go through the whole article for the sake of time, but like I say, if you want to read through it in detail, I will put the link in the description box. For example, here it goes on to talk about Donald Trump. It says here it is not unreasonable for South Koreans to be concerned about abandonment, given that President Trump was talking about pulling US troops out of South Korea just a few years ago, says Sue Mi Terry, noting that South Korea and Japan are also concerned about the challenge posed by increasingly assertive China. Now, Trump could find himself back in power, 2024, and that will, again, make South Korea worry. So these nations that have alliances with America, I've mentioned before, for example, Saudi Arabia, they're starting to look over their shoulder because they're seeing America's enemies rise, and they're looking at America and they're saying, are you really going to defend us in this scenario? And now they have a big question on their hands. And ultimately, these enemies of America, the ones who are suffering from these sanctions, they're starting to stand up. They're starting to say, the weak are starting to say, I am strong. And they're displaying their nuclear power, ready, just in time for World War III. So like I say, I will put the link for these two articles in the description box. And before I go, I'm going to leave you with Psalms chapter 7 and 11. And it says, God judgeth the righteous, and God is angry with the wicked every day. Don't forget Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushua is long-suffering. And that is the only reason why the wicked are out here and allowed to carry on for a short period of time. Ultimately, with the wickedness that's taking place on a daily basis, judgment should be coming, and people should be dropping down dead on a daily basis. The amount of people that went out today and committed adultery, they should have all been put to death by the end of today. So that's not happening. People are allowed to commit this wickedness, and they're given a short time to allow this to happen in Revelation chapter 20. But ultimately, that's all coming to an end. And this period of Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushua, allowing the people to get away with this wickedness, this is the Lord being long-suffering. But that is all due to end very soon. It says, if he turn not, he will whet his sword. So if Yahweh was to turn away from the wickedness and not see it, then he wouldn't know. But that's impossible. He is Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushua. He sees everything, so he sees the wickedness going on, and for that reason, he has whet his sword, which to whet a sword to mean sharpen it. He hath bent his bow and made it ready, and that bow being that nuclear ICBMs. He got Iran, Putin, whoever, this King Jong-un, they are bending the bows. They are making it ready, the arrows of the Lord, ready for this great destruction. For God judgeth the righteous, and God is angry with the wicked every day. But that judgment for the wicked is coming in the day of the Lord. He hath also prepared for him the instruments of death. He ordaineth his arrows against the persecutors. So, when you look at instruments of death, they come with force of power to create that death. And we can see, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is putting the spirit on these leaders. Looking at these diagrams, we can see that Yahweh Bashim Yahushai is giving the understanding and putting the spirit on these leaders to make this all happen, to bend the bow and to whet that sword. And he's given them the instruments of death, these nuclear ICBMs. And as you can see here in 2022, they're learning how to use them, these new toys. Carrying on, Psalms 7 and 14 says, Behold, he travaileth with iniquity, and hath conceived mischief, and brought forth falsehood. That's representing these Edomites, the wicked of this world. And these other nations ultimately are in conjunction with the Edomites. They do learn of these falsehoods, and they do go along with them. And even some of our own people, pretty much 2/3 of our own people, go along with them. And with that, that's why great judgment is coming in the day of the Lord. It says, he made a pit. These Edomites have made a pit and digged it, and is fallen into the ditch which he hath made. And that's regarding these sanctions. They made a pit. They made a situation by going out and using their military might, imposing sanctions on people. Once they got the majority of nations on their side, it then makes it harder for the rest of the nations to refuse. And that is them ultimately digging a pit. But now we're getting to the time of World War III, you're going to see them fall into it. All of a sudden, these allies that they have are starting to fall away. And America is stretched, looking all over the world, looking at Russia, looking at the Middle East, looking at China, looking at North Korea, saying, which one of these is going to kick off next? And ultimately, these people are all, most of these nations are pissed off because of the sanctions that have been placed on them. This is the pit these Edomites have dug, and ultimately Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai will have them fall into the ditch which he made. It says, his mischief shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down upon his own pate. So, the way they manipulate people with military might, that is now coming back upon them. And the way that they cause mischief upon people is going to return upon them with these ICBMs and the destruction of America, Babylon the Great. And his violent dealings shall come down upon his own pate. I will praise the Lord according to his righteousness, and I will sing praise to the name of the Lord, the Most High. So, all capitals talking of Yahweh, and it's talking of his righteousness. His righteousness is this judgment that is coming in World War III. This is the work of Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai, and this is righteous judgment upon this earth. And it says, and I will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. So that means, if you're dealing with Yahweh, but if you're dealing with the Most High, you have to have his name. And the name being Yahweh, and his son's name, Yahweh Shai. So I hope that was edifying. I'm going to leave it right there. And until next time, I'm going to say all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakat Kwadash. And until next time, Shalom.
Someday you wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far beyond.